Welcome to Wealth Unfiltered, your go-to source for industry insights and wealth creation. Stay ahead of the curve with a thorough breakdown of market trends, financial developments, and the impact of current events on your wealth building strategy. We deliver the latest updates and essential insights into the financial world through expert interviews and detailed analysis. Hi there. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to our debut episode of Wealth Unfiltered. This is something that we have been working on for several months, and we are so very excited to bring this to you now. My name is Samantha Parinello, and I will be one of your hosts for the entire season. Alongside me will be my resident guest and basically host, Chris Parinello. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I am so excited. I know you are too. We have a lot of fun in store for you this season. So some of the things that we're going to be doing is we'll have interviews with experts. We're going to bring you advice on wealth building and creating passive and active income strategies. We also will have what I like to call the hot take from Chris. So each episode, not this one, but the next ones we'll have where he brings us a hot take, usually surrounding our topic, or maybe it's just something that he thinks is really important for us all to know. And then I think, and most importantly for us, I think this is about us continue to educate people. I think no matter whether you are a new investor or you have been investing for a very long time, all of us are looking for new resources and new ways to continue our growth and wealth building journey altogether. So I think we're both just really, really excited to get started. So throughout this episode, you're going to learn a little bit about me. You'll learn a lot about Chris. And I figured the way that we could do this is by asking a couple of fun questions just to get the conversation started. So Chris, what I want to know is, what is one piece of advice that you have learned that you take with you, use daily, or that has truly influenced you?
Yeah, I would say at an early age, the thing that my dad would always tell me is if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. It isn't always the easiest thing to do because there's always a shortcut. There's always something you can do to kind of fast track. And efficiency is smart as well. But what I've found is that if you really take your time and plan things out the proper way, it always serves you.
So do you feel like you use this in both your personal and professional life? Or do you feel like, since you said it's difficult, do you favor one or the other?
Definitely. Even, when it comes to parenting, there's
true.
always like an easy road out, like something that you can immediately do that will probably solve your immediate problem. Just like if you were putting together a table or you were planning your portfolio, there's little things that you can do that would be very quick. And then if you ask yourself, like, is this really worth my time? And if you're going to spend a lot of time on it, or it's something that's important for your future, if you methodically plan it out and actually do it the right way, one thing that's not related to work that's really tangent is like fitness. You could do a fad diet. You could do something to build muscle very quickly, or you can do it the right way. And it takes longer. It's a longer road traveled, but you get much more gain.
So Chris touched on a couple of topics here that I think are really important as you get to know us. So we are parents. We have a beautiful 8-year-old daughter. And I think you'll hear throughout the season that we like to talk about not only how we encourage her already from a young age, start investing, but we have created different pathways for her to start making money, for her to feel empowered to do so as well. So that's just one tidbit of information for you all as you get to know us. I think something else that you mentioned that is also really important to us is the fitness aspect. So we are two people who actually, when we met through friendships. And one of the things that really bonded us was our love of going to the gym and playing basketball every single morning. So we continue to do the gym daily with each other, even if it's just a 30-minute quick session, it's just to get stretched. We use that as a part of our bonding, but it's also part of setting the tone for our day. So I think one of the things that we'll touch on in this season is going to be like habits of people who become millionaires, people who want to be successful. And for us, of course, we would like to become millionaires one day, but our goal to have success and be great is to start with smart habits such as fitness. So I think that that's also really important. And then the last thing that you brought up that I'd love to hear more about is you talked about maybe techniques for building a portfolio. And one of our next episodes, I think in the next 2 or 3, we'll be talking about building a better portfolio. And so maybe you can just touch on, from your job, which Also, we haven't mentioned yet, if you can let us know what your current role is, and then maybe a little bit about what you just talked about being influenced actually impacts your role currently.
Yeah, absolutely. So my current role is the Director of Investor Relations for Viking Capital. I'm really helping investors understand how to invest in alternative opportunities, primarily with Viking Capital. That's just one small section of someone's portfolio. So if I was talking to an investor, usually what makes up somebody's portfolio is a collection of traditional equities, stocks, bonds. People usually have a 401k or IRAs, and then they're looking for ways to kind of build and diversify those strategies, build in tax advantage strategies. There's lots of different ways to build wealth and hopefully generational wealth. And just like you brought up in your first topic, there's a lot of thought that should go into it, and there's a lot of moving pieces. And the other big piece of advice that I got growing up is when you're deciding what you want to invest in, the biggest tool that you can use is making sure that you understand what you're investing in, how it works, and where there's risk. And that, I think, is the forefront of how I attack my role at Viking Capital. Is when investors come to me, it's not necessarily a sales position where I'm trying to say the right collection of words to get them to say yes to the investment. It's really helping them understand how the deal works and where there's risk and what they need to consider in order to figure out if the investment fits into their buy box or their risk profile.
Yeah, no, great advice. I know firsthand. I mean, I also work for Viking Capital currently. I am the growth marketing manager. And for me, I watch Chris on a daily basis, whether he is directly speaking with an investor via Zoom or if he's recording a performer review for that person to share so that they understand one of the deals. I think one of the cool pieces is that when we watch the investor relations team that you head, I find it very inspiring and very cool that when we talk to investors, like you and I will go face to face and speak with investors and really kind of humanize who we are, right? I mean, I think the way that you and I both look at our positions within Viking is to make sure that we're authentic, and that if we don't believe in the product, which is, the investment itself, that we wouldn't be there, and we also wouldn't be able to actually take on these roles. So I think it's really important, like you said, education. I am learning and growing every single day through my role. I've been with the company just under 2 years now, and for me, I mean, I think you can tell I've grown leaps, bounds from where I started, but I would definitely call myself a novice. And I think that's also what's going to be really exciting about this podcast, is that there's going to be people just like me who are going to grow and learn through our experiences, as well as like what we bring to the show, and specifically the fact that you're an expert at what you do.
Yeah. And I think, the thing that you said that most resonated with me is the authenticity. And for those of you that are watching that have aspirations of doing investor relations or capital raising for any type of investment, when you're building these relationships, the folks that choose to invest with you, they're going to look at the deal, they're going to look at the mechanics of the deal, try to assess risk. But at the end of the day, people invest with people. And as the head of investor relations, I'm the piece that's showing all of the investors who Viking is, who Vikram and Ravi are, what our values are, and the relationship that you build will precede any single deal. A lot of people do deals, but what you can do to set yourself apart is to actually build an atmosphere where you can build trust, and they know that you're going to help them understand how to make good decisions if they don't already know how to make them themselves.
So another question for you. What would be one thing that you've maybe learned since working at Viking or in the last couple of years that you wish you would have just known sooner?
I would say I've always, earlier in my career, I felt like I was constrained by time. So I never felt like I had enough time to do anything. I was trying to get mentorship. I was trying to have quality time with my family and friends. And one of the things that I figured out was I just wasn't organizing my time well enough. So I wanted to go to the gym, getting up a little bit earlier, or 5 o'clock in the morning. That became mandatory once I started working, 9 to 5 and I was, living in LA. I needed to find time in order to go to the gym. And I carved out my lunch and I carved out before work and I carved out after work. And one of those 3 times or all of those 3 times would work for a gym session. Prior to, learning that I could organize my time properly, something would always get missed out. And as I've grown, I've figured out that there's lots of pockets of time when you're really not doing something very important. And if you prioritize what you're doing and you really organize your time and make the most of it, there's no limit to what you can accomplish.
Yeah, the master of that, I think, in our company is my boss, the director of marketing, Ashley. She has absolutely helped me. One thing that, my transition into marketing. So kind of to give some background on me, my background has gone from being the very low totem pole, the hostess, busser scenario in a restaurant, 15 years old, to growing all the way up through the entire chain and becoming one of the lead managers for Michelin star restaurants. So I opened up some restaurants in Miami and in Nashville. And I think that's like the epitome of anyone who's been in a restaurant is getting to the Michelin star level. And I can say that it was very intentional. It's not something that you fall into. It's something that you grow into. And taking my skills in operation, I would say the biggest difference is that when you are working in an environment like that, it's a consistent change. So there isn't a lot of planning that you get to do. You plan the best you can for the operation, but every moment of every day is quick reaction change because you're based off of who the patrons are in the establishment, and then making sure that you're optimizing every moment and that you're giving the absolute best experience you can. In marketing, everything is very strategic and everything has to be planned out. And so for me, learning how to do time blocks and to give myself grace, and say, okay, how much time is this really going to take? And really give my full attention to those things and not be multitasking the way that I did before and really be intentional in those moments has been a huge strength that I've added to my toolbox, because before I would say I'm one of the better people I know at operations as a whole. Holistically, in any business, I've owned my own company before and I've been very active in entrepreneurship itself. But the biggest piece for marketing is that there is so much strategy. And that aspect has really helped me, I think, as I've grown into this new role. I mean, I started off just writing blogs and organic content, and now I'm a manager overseeing, human beings doing the same thing. So that's just a little bit about me as well. And I think I have one more question that I'd like to ask you. If you weren't the director of investor relations for Viking Capital and you could be anything right now, what would it be?
Professional basketball players out.
It doesn't have to be out, but
No, I mean, I think, what I was always interested in, a couple of passions. I always loved architecture. So I think if I didn't go the finance route, I would have, followed a passion for maybe a custom home builder or something like that. Or the other big passion that I have that I never really wanted to mix it being a career and just for it to continue being a passion was, cooking and being a chef. I'd say those are the two most, if I had to do something I loved for a career and I couldn't do what I'm already doing, which I love, those would be the two.
Yeah, I think that is a absolute, I should have thought of it myself, is that you could have been a chef. 100%. You are the chef in our home. Although I do love to cook, I'm not a bad cook, but I would say I am not a chef. You are the chef in our home and you make incredible, incredible food for everyone, whether it's a holiday or just at home for our baby. I think that is definitely one of your hidden talents that you should keep to know when someone's like, what's a hidden talent of yours? I am great in the kitchen for sure. Okay, so I told everybody about what I do, how I got to where I am, but I would love for you to, share with us a little bit about your background, but more of where have you been and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career, when I graduated from college, I immediately moved to China. I'd already been living there for a couple of years, learning Chinese as part of an academic program. I worked for a short time with a Chinese real estate firm. And that was my first foray into real estate. In my mind, when I was studying Chinese and business, I thought I was going to be doing import-export work. That was kind of the work that my dad had been in growing up. When I moved stateside, my experience of working with a Chinese real estate firm and a high net worth Chinese investor led me to start working with a group in Southern California that was focused on bringing in investment dollars into hotel development deals. And at that point, I didn't have not much real estate experience. I had, decent amount of sales experience. I had also spent my college years working in restaurants. So I got along, was personable. I was really fortunate to work for Cosmont Companies and California Golden Fund with these two kind of real estate titans in Southern California that just immense amount of mentorship. So from watching them in board meetings and having the foresight to really watch how they acted and really learn, joining Urban Land Institute, understanding how deals were structured, seeing how they had both multiple businesses and how they managed their time. And 6-7 years of that was really what structured all of my habits, professional habits.
And you started as an analyst and then moved your way up, correct? Or what was your trajectory with those companies?
So when I was first hired, I was an analyst with Cosmont Companies, which Cosmont Companies is owned by Larry Cosmont. He was the youngest city manager in California history. He was like 27 years old when he became a city manager in the 80s. And
which is wild.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And for his company, and so he and John Curtis, who was most recently the mayor of La Cañada Flint Ridge, which is near Pasadena, they joined to start California Golden Fund, which is an EB5 regional center that focused on bringing investment dollars from overseas. Still around today.
Right.
And I still consult with them to this day. They built that company in a time, 2009, 2010, after the great financial crisis, where it was hard to find liquidity in order to develop deals. And if you did find liquidity, it was very expensive. So the EB5 program, which had been around since the 90s, kind of became a really strong program in order to get investment dollars into development deals. And it was a win-win for everyone. Foreign investors got a green card for investing and creating jobs. The city got jobs created, and the developers got affordable capital.
Right.
And, with Larry's company, Cosmont Companies, really focused on helping cities and municipalities in Southern California, really all of California, plan and strategically set up the economic development initiatives at the city level. So really an economic consultant that the cities use to grow. And
which is like a great way for you to start learning, because when we do right now, you have to know all about like what the economy is doing, where the asset's going to be located, what makes those strong, So I think that that's a huge part of your growth trajectory.
Yeah, that was eye-opening. And being an analyst with that company, it was learning about the entitlement process, learning if you're going to develop something, especially in California, what do you need to do in order to get the land zoned? What do you have to do to get the correct permits? And entitlements in California are a lot harder than a lot of the places that we do business now. So that was one piece. And becoming an analyst there, it was learning anything from putting a presentation together, learning how all of the different segments, because even that company had 3 different segments in it that I was learning, and getting exposure to corporate culture, being in a boardroom, watching, Larry give a presentation, going to conferences, all of that, at a young age, it was kind of eye-opening, and it was just watch and learn.
Yeah,
and then eventually after, being an analyst at both companies, California Golden Fund, I was quickly promoted into being the project manager and then the managing director of California Golden Fund, where I really headed up all of the foreign travel, going to China, Korea, Vietnam.
Which I was going to say, we have to get into that at some point in our podcast, because we have traveled across the world, thankfully, for that job that you had. And, that was just another piece of eye-opening culture and exciting things that we've done together as we've continued to grow and work together. So that's really fun.
Right. Like that part of, when I proved to them that I could head that company, and I moved away from really doing a lot of structured finance and the parts of Cosmont Companies that I was assisting with, I really focused on, the marketing, sales, and the education, just like I'm doing today with Viking, where I'm helping people understand how, real estate, private equity works in that role. And this is really the most I took from that helps me in today's role, is I would jump on a Zoom call with 50 Indian investors in India, explaining them how to get their green card and how to assess risk. Because the worst thing for them, a lot of them weren't really looking at getting a big return. They were looking at
that wasn't the important part.
Yeah, their primary goal was to get a green card, and a lot of times it was, I want a green card for my child, so when they graduate college, they don't have to leave.
Right, make a better life.
So, but a lot of these people, knew they wanted the green card, but maybe had never seen a hotel development deal. They didn't understand the terms of
Right.
RevPAR or cost per key or anything like that. And a lot of folks in that industry would kind of take advantage of the sophistication of that investor.
Right.
And what I learned was if you could simplify and you help them understand, you'd build trust. And if you built trust, then people would work with you. And one of the goals of CGF was always, if you help somebody get a green card and immigrate into the United States, part-time into the United States, they bring their businesses here. Eventually they're going to want to invest in other things as well. And that
Right.
was something that we wanted to harness at CGF.
Well, and then you living in China for, for almost 5 years, I think made you really well suited for when they needed Chinese investors to be spoken to. Because you did have, of course, you would have somebody there to translate some like really overly sophisticated, financial terms. But you also were well suited to deal with them because it's also a cultural thing and there's a special way to do that. And so when they would send you to China, they would say, yes, Samantha, you can go with him. And like, that was my first introduction to going with you to go meet investors, and that was, about 8 years ago that we started actually going face to face and doing that together. So the fact that I can still do that now and still be a part of this and now we're doing a podcast together, I think the growth, not only from what you've done, yourself professionally, but I think for us as a couple and continued our trajectory, I think is really, speaks volumes to like why we're doing what we're doing and how we really encourage each other's professional growth as much as we do our personal growth and development.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I meant to interrupt you earlier when you were talking about, kind of the lessons you learned in marketing and how you went from, you are the integrator for our family. Like I will have a vision and then it's like, how do we do this? And you'll kind of figure out how to make sure all the proper steps are taken and we're organizationally sound. My personality and my vision when it comes to a career I had before, the career that I have now, one of the things that I really learned, and I think it started in my earliest roles, was less time blocking and saying like I have from 2 to 3, I'm going to focus on this. From 2 to 3, it was more of in investor relations or really any kind of investment sales, you kind of have to interweave your life into your work.
It's
and
true.
if you don't do that, something's going to suffer.
And you need a partner who's willing to let you do it.
And that exactly.
And encourage
and
it.
It becomes if you have a partnership in that way and you clearly line out what the partnership goals are, but in addition to that, kind of what it takes to be successful, what you have if you don't have that partnership is one person gone all the time, not seeing your family, not seeing any of these things.
Right.
Just the other day we were in San Francisco and we were meeting with investors and one of them was a C-suite executive with a hospital. And, she was admiring how much we had been able to weave our lives in with work and still have quality of life.
Right.
And a lot of people think quality of life is having unlimited PTO or being able to, take a fancy vacation or being able to retire early. But really, in my mind, quality of life is if you love what you do, making sure that you have everything organized in a way to where you still get to enjoy the smaller things in life. Maybe you're able, we get to go and work remotely. That enables a lot of it.
That's been the biggest change is me being able to work remotely alongside you and giving us both the opportunity to have, it's your pickup day for our daughter and it's my pickup day for our daughter and having that flexibility that we didn't have before and being able to say, you have a webinar 7:00 at night. So I'm going to own homework, dinner, bedtime, make sure she says goodnight to you before you get started and we move along with the day and then be your cheerleader when you get off and have a glass of wine waiting. And, I think that having that ability for us both to feel like what you're doing is impactful, I think helps as well, right? I think if I wasn't seeing what you do, I think that's probably an issue that people have, right? Is that if you only hear from your person about what they're doing and it's not really, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, right? And then they get to you and you're like, well, I don't really care what you're doing. Now you're home. Now this is your boundary. Now you're home. But for us, we live and we work and we do everything from our home. Even this podcast is built in our home.
Right.
So for us, I think, like you were saying, the interweaving of everything that we've created has given us flexibility, has given us empowerment to take on more. And we encourage each other to be the best selves that we can because we understand what the other person is really doing and what their role is. And your impact truly changes lives. It changed my life. And it's continued to change investors' lives who see that your authenticity and that your honesty and transparency in what you do means that the decision that they make is wholeheartedly theirs. And you go over the risks, you go over the upside, you go over like what you see in the market, like what your story is, like what you feel is happening. And then you ask them, does that align with theirs? And I watched the whole entire from start to finish unfold. And I think to myself, wow, like I admire this person who can go into what most people would consider a sales role. And for you, it's just not. That's not the person you are. It's not how you look at your position. And I feel like it's so neat to watch that. And I know we kind of went off a little bit from the actual question I had for you. So I'll bring us back. I know that you were finishing with, your role with California Golden Fund and your job as a managing director for them. But then once we left Los Angeles, we pivoted to moving to Miami. So then what was your role there?
Right. So call it the end, but the transition away from Southern California and California Golden Fund was really the EB5 program was a government program that sunset.
Right.
So the flip of a switch, it didn't get reauthorized. And, there was still a role for me at the company to do the reporting. And I was still hired,
right.
But there was no new marketing. So I couldn't structure any new deals. We couldn't go and raise more funds. So at that point, we moved to South Florida. And frankly, Ella was born and I got bored. So I had a job. I didn't have a ton to do. I reached out to the folks that I was working for and I was like, would you guys, I'm still going to do all of the things that I need to do, but it's such a small amount of time. Would you mind if I, looked for another role, something that would be interesting? And I took on a part-time role with a real estate private equity firm. It was a lot like Viking. The difference being that they didn't use any retail capital. So the folks that invested in those deals were pretty sophisticated, ultra high net worth investors, or they were family offices or RIAs. And they were groups that were more institutional in nature. And that was like my first foray into multifamily. So at this point, I knew how to do investor relations. I knew how to raise capital. I knew how hotel development worked. I knew how to explain how those things worked. And when I started working for Pia Residential, they saw that I had all of these skills, but I didn't have the multifamily skills. And this is a trend. Any new role I take, there's usually some gap where my curiosity has pulled me in a direction and I'm taking everything that I've learned and I'm seeking out mentorship. And that's one of the things that I've always yearned for is really strong mentorship. And when I got there, it became clear to me that what I needed to be able to be successful and to grow in that company was to understand the inner workings of underwriting for multifamily apartments. And the timing in 2020 was kind of coincided with a big run up in really inexpensive debt and a really, really robust multifamily market. So
because of COVID.
Right. So I walked into a company that was doing multiple deals and they really threw me to the fire. And once they realized that I could keep up, it became a full-time role and it became, me being the director of capital markets.
Right.
So what turned into kind of a part-time COVID role while everyone was losing their jobs in hospitality or in-person type things.
And that's why I transitioned out of being in hospitality.
And I remember that day, the day before I got the call that they were going to bring me on. And the next day,
I got the call that
Robichon's restaurant in Miami ended because they were based in New York and they closed before everyone else in South Florida.
Yeah, before anyone else knew anything. New York was one of the very first areas to shut everything down.
Right. So it was, pretty serendipitous. As you were leaving a role, I was taking on another one. But what I really learned from the guys that built Pia was how to evaluate these investments. And the one thing that I can say about those guys is they were so risk averse. So understanding replacement costs, understanding, the interest rate environments, how cap rates work, all of that kind of foundational understanding I learned there. When I transitioned from Pia to Viking, the big opportunity and the part of my brain that got curious was I wanted to take all the things that I had learned on an institutional level and I wanted to work with the smaller investor.
Right.
I wanted to take somebody that, and I had people that wanted to invest with Pia, but they were too small of an investor. They didn't hit our minimums. And I was
Yeah,
like,
the minimums were much higher
they were
there.
much higher.
Yeah.
So I tried to pitch that we should go after smaller investors, and that wasn't, attractive to them. And one of the things that I really loved about Viking was that the ideas that I had, the things that I thought would be really, really neat for Pia, Viking was already doing. I started researching them, and I really wanted to figure out how their company worked and how they were finding success and how they were, collecting and helping, hundreds of investors at a time, where
Right.
our deals were made up of like 8 investors and like really big check writers, or 20 investors. So once I decided to leave Pia and start working with Viking, it really was like drinking water through a hose, because, you think you want something, but the transition of having to answer to 10 investors, 20 investors, and give a quarterly report and explain what's going on, especially if there's any adversity, it's very simple. My quality of life at Pia was very good.
Yeah.
When I started with Viking, it was like, okay, we already have 350 investors or 400 investors, and everyone's upset that they didn't get their K1s, and we're having this issue, and boom, it was like on the phone.
Well, if they were transitioning away from
From a
somebody
rating
who was
system.
already in your position who
Right.
was leaving.
Right.
And then, so there was a gap there that really got missed, and that's why the K1s didn't go out. Walking into, I think, any type of environment, especially your first week. I mean, it was really, they actually started you a week early, because they were like, we really would just like you to start, because we have this gap to fill, and we know that you asked us for 2 weeks, but can you just actually start now, and then you can just do both roles for a little while? And you were like, I'll make it work. And you pivoted very quickly, and you joined the team.
Right. And, the number 2 that, was here, that became my number 2 when I was hired, Amir, is still here today.
Yeah,
But,
he's the
he was
constant.
also leaving on vacation that week. So he basically gave me the login information, and then he was in Egypt for a month. So I sat down at the kitchen table, and I was like, okay, I have a roster of 350 investors. Everyone's a little bit upset that they haven't gotten their K1s, but this isn't really my fault. I'm going to take this opportunity to be the white knight that's going to tell them all how things
This
are
is
going
my
to change.
introduction to you
Right.
all.
This is who
Hi,
I
I'm Chris
am.
Parinello, and I'm
the
going
one
to
in
save
this
you and get
role.
your K1.
This is how I do business. And from now on, what I can promise you is, we're going to get K1s out faster, and I'm going to be changing things, and you're going to like the new version of what Viking is.
Right.
And it was hard, but making all of those phone calls those first 3 or 4 weeks, introduced me to the entire investor base.
I was going to say, it may have not been like what you would have really wanted ideally if you thought about how your first week would go, but most people don't get the opportunity to talk to so many investors right away. It's more of, well, when we have a new deal, or, oh, well, if somebody has something wrong. But really, it was your opportunity to come in and phone call after phone call after phone call and really say, hi, I'm Chris Parnell, and I'm the new director of investor relations, and I want to introduce myself. Also, this is what's going on with your K1. Also, can I answer any questions for you? And I think that's pretty neat. I think that was a really interesting way to get started, but I think it actually set you up for the continued success. I mean, how many new investors do we have since you've started?
So,
And also, I guess you should say how long you've been there now.
This coming March will mark 3 years
Okay.
of me leading the department of investor relations department for Viking. And we've gone from just under 400 investors to about 1,000.
And that's a huge, huge win, I think. I mean,
Yeah. 3X.
yeah,
you know,
3Xing. That's pretty cool. I would say that's something to hang your hat on.
Yeah,
That's
no,
pretty neat.
absolutely. And I think everyone's, our department's happy, Viking's happy as a whole. Part of it's the market and being able to, it's a testament to the entire team. We have a really strong acquisitions department that finds us deals. We have a really strong asset management department
Absolutely.
that goes in and really manages these things and makes what the dreams that acquisitions puts together in the pro forma. They're the ones
reality.
that have to do the work.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of years, when I first got hired, marketing didn't exist. It was just
You're right.
IR. And after, me kind of pleading with, Vikram and Ravi that I'm really good at one thing, it's not marketing.
Right. Well,
and that we
because you have to
really-
remember, I think you started and you did have, paid ads people, and you had another company that worked outside of Viking to help with marketing, but we didn't have an in-house department.
Right.
But you were tasked with being the leader of marketing. Like, you need to get us new leads. You need to find them. You need to be the person who gets these deals out there. And you were like, that's super neat and super cool. And I will do this for as long as I can. But I think once you really started gaining traction on the number of investors that were coming through, I saw you were like, I need help with this. And I'm really glad that, stood up and said, I need help. And then you also spearheaded the finding of Ashley, our director of marketing. And she did the same thing I did. She started in one position. She actually started in the position I am now as the growth marketing manager. And she worked herself into being the director and has built an incredible department. We went from being 1 to 2 to now I think there's like 6 of us or 7 of us. Maybe more. I mean, we keep adding to it, but we need it because the growth of the company and what we're hoping to continue to do.
Yeah, and there's a clear line. Like anyone that's been with us for the last 3 years can probably just pull out all of the investment materials that they got in year 1 and compare them to the investment materials that they're getting today. And it isn't in there. It's the quarterly reports. It's what we've learned. And, Ashley and I joke about this. I'm sure you two do as well. There's literally anything that the company needs to do can basically be considered marketing. Whether it's, reporting, whether it's, how well the properties are leasing up, everything kind of goes back to how well you're marketing, because it's more than just emails that go out. It's emails, it's organization, it's the CRM, it's the corporate image and branding, and it's harnessing my voice, Vikram and Ravi's voice, and really it's the Rosetta Stone that helps everybody understand what Viking's trying to accomplish.
Especially because I think since you've started to, I know that they had, this was an important part of Viking from the start, but I think especially as you've moved into the role is education has become very much like a top priority. So doing reels and performas and webinars and mini webinars and having like several different avenues and resources, the blogs that I write, the organic social content we put out there, I think the goal is like to continue to educate people and to be a strong resource for people. And I think that has been something you would have never been able to truly accomplish at the level you have without having the in-house marketing team, and specifically Ashley's vision and her ability to just continue to like shift and maneuver at the last second and to help, strategize where we're going and how we're going to continue to find new people and to nurture existing people. I would say that's one thing that you and Ashley talk a lot about with your teams, right? With my team, she speaks, and you talk with your investor relations team, is about nurturing is just as, if not more important than finding the new leads and creating something, whether it is educational content or just an investor appreciation dinner or meeting face-to-face or whatever it is, right? Like, I think that's a big component that maybe a lot of other companies like ours don't make a top priority.
Yeah, and it isn't all altruistic. Like we'd like to say, every day we wake up and try to figure out how to make investors' lives better. And for the most part, there is some of that, but it's also decreasing our own brain damage. So like when Ashley and I sit down and talk about what new marketing initiatives would be helpful for me, a lot of it is, okay, if you have 100 investors asking you the same question, instead of them getting on the phone and calling you or Amir or Amber or Hayden and asking you that question and then waiting for you to get the answer back, why don't we send an FAQ that compiles the top 10 questions that somebody asked about a deal? And that one IR marketing collaboration that took us 2 hours to put together takes away the need to do 1,000 phone calls.
Right. And then it's so accessible for everyone who has those same questions.
Right. Another one is segmenting our lists. One of the big problems that we had was, from our seat, if we're raising capital for a deal and the money's not coming in quickly enough, people haven't signed docs, people haven't funded. A lot of times it's like, okay, well, we need to follow up more quickly. We need to send more emails. What we found is that there's a lot of investors who invested. If you don't segment your list, then those people keep getting those emails too.
Right.
And people get really annoyed. They're like, hey, I've already invested with you. Why are you sending me 20 more emails asking me to invest again? Right. So it isn't obvious that that's a marketing function. But before I had the support of the marketing team, I didn't have the ability or the skill of how to segment a list and how to properly send emails out with intention and be proactive about all of these things. And a lot of that's come together since Ashley and I have really, really built a strong partnership.
Absolutely. I would say that is like the cool part about what Ravi and Vic created was having like somebody who's the visionary and the integrator. We keep looking at our directors' relationships. We're finding that there's like partnerships within, each one. And then there's usually an integrator and there's a visionary. And then with like in those departments, same thing. Like in my department, she's the visionary, I'm the integrator. And we just continue to find our roles that way. And they kind of trickle down. And I find it really, really like, I feel like that strategy and the way that Vic and Ravi have like created the company top down to do it that way is like, having aces in places and making sure you have the right people in the seats. And as we've continued to grow our company, adding Jack into the acquisitions role, I think immensely helped Judah, who finds all of our deals and does all the underwriting process for the team. I think that we're just continuing to grow. And as we continue to grow, we're finding those right people. And, not to say that we don't do tons and tons and tons of interviews. And, now we have Julia in operations who's like sifting through thousands of resumes and finding us candidates that are, fitting those boxes and making sure that they are actually culturally a fit. And they also have, the background and the experience. And I think as we keep those strong fundamentals, I think, sky's the limits for what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it because it's very much, what you keep referring to, for the audience that has never seen an EOS system, but Viking runs on an EOS or entrepreneurial operating system. And at the top of it, you have a visionary who's usually the CEO. In our case, it's Vikram. And then you have an integrator who is Ravi. And the idea would be that you have one person that has all of the ideas and this really great vision is going to propel the company through a rocket ship. And then you have another person who is an integrator who is going to say, this is realistic or this isn't. This is what we need. This is the plan to achieve that vision.
Right.
And like you, adeptly, noted, Viking has multiple silos of divisions. So we have an asset management division. We have an acquisitions division. We have marketing, we have investor relations, we have operations, and we have finance. And they all kind of couple together. So
Absolutely.
Like acquisitions is the vision, asset management is the integrator.
Right. It's
Capital,
super neat.
Investor relations is the vision, marketing is integrator.
Right.
And finance is the integrator for operations. Operations is the one that's like, we're going to do this. This is how we're going to operate. There's an interrelation of working, but it all stems from that EOS system that has just proven to be so valuable for us.
Right. Well, I feel like we've covered, what you've done, your growth and where you are today. I think we've given a snippet about me. And I think that as you guys continue to listen to Wealth Unfiltered, you'll get to learn more about our dynamic, what I do, my history as well. You'll hear more about the things that matter most to us. And hopefully you enjoyed the first episode. So unless you have anything else you'd like to say to wrap it up.
No, thanks everybody for joining. We're really excited to bring, all the different, snippets of information this season.
Yeah. And look forward to Chris's hot take on the next episode. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We truly appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your friends. Until next time.